Just going to run this dog to see if we can find any type of human remains that are left.
Listen to Where Secrets Go to Die, The Disappearance of Derek Hennigan. From the Detroit Free Press, a new podcast set in the woods of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Available on Apple, Spotify, Freep.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra podcast with Rob Oller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the BuckeyeXtra football podcast spring game recap edition. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by Bill Rabinowitz and Rob Oller. Ohio State spring game was on Saturday. They wrapped up spring practice. We saw 5 quarterbacks get to play, and let's maybe just start there because that was the headline coming out of spring practice. Ohio State had a bunch of guys competing for that spot to replace Kyle McCord as the guy, and they do not have that position settled as we leave spring ball.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised, I guess, that Will Howard took the first snaps because in the practices we've seen, Devin Brown had been taking the first snaps. We've been told they were rotating through and don't make anything of it. But, look, whoever starts the spring game, that means something, right? I thought Will Howard was good. I mean, there were no bad plays. I don't think there were any, plays that made you go, wow. The best play of the game, and it was really more by Emeka Egbuka, was the pass he threw, a sideline pass that Egbuka made a one-handed catch to stay in bounds. That was the highlight of the day. But I think he helped himself, but I don't think it was a spectacular performance. He threw 13 times, Joey, and Devin Brown only threw 7. He did lead the team offense to the first touchdown of the game late in the first half. I thought he played fine. Had a couple of nice scrambles at the beginning. Julian Sand, we had been hearing this, buzz about all spring. Well, he looked kind of like a freshman. He had, 1 or 2 picks on Saturday, underthrew a ball. We didn't realize until after the game, because we were in the press box, just how gusty it was out there. We tried to shoot a video, and the camera kept blowing over on a little tripod. So it was probably not the easiest weather to throw in.
Yeah, I mean, Sand looked like a freshman there. Nolan looked okay. And I think he had as many carries as he did completions, 5. And he was also, I believe, going against, lower level talent, let's say. I thought that Lincoln Keenholz did not help himself. I thought the quarterback play in general was not, with the first 2 guys, Howard and Brown, they didn't blow me away, but they weren't terrible. That was my take on it. And I think Joey probably can get into this. Part of it is, it was such a small sample size that it's really hard to know, how good they are. I wrote in my column, like the spring game isn't so much about how good a guy is, as much as maybe how bad he is. Bad on that day, or just what he needs to work on. And I thought the most raw, Julian Sand, he may have a huge upside, but he was the rawest of anybody, I thought. And to me, it's a 2-horse race, which, that's really no shocker. I know we've been speculating that saying, oh, maybe he could do something. Not really realistic to think he's going to start the first game. Now, maybe later in the season, he moves to number 2. Or maybe Brown. I don't think Howard's going anywhere. Maybe Brown enters the transfer portal. We don't know. Kind of doubt it. Said he hasn't. But that's the way Sand maybe moves up. But I just thought he was very raw. I'd be curious what you guys thought.
Yeah, my feeling coming out of the spring game was maybe different than what I expected going in. When Bill and I did an episode last week, we were talking about how last year's spring game had been fairly anticlimactic because Devin Brown broke his pinky, couldn't play in the game, really just left Kyle McCord and Tristan Gebbia as the only scholarship quarterbacks remaining. And, the main competitor with McCord for that starting job, Brown, couldn't play. And this year, you have a larger cast of candidates, and certainly the 2 guys who are most likely to start next year being Will Howard and Devin Brown would have a big chance to try to make their case, but they only had 2 series leading the offense, which is sort of the downside of having so many guys at that quarterback position. And Will Howard's last throw in the spring game came with 7 minutes in the second quarter. So it ended up being in an odd way, kind of like last year, where you didn't really feel like the competition had a chance to really be settled because you just didn't give those 2 guys who were the main competitors in the competition enough opportunities. And that's because you're trying to get 5 guys enough reps. So it's a little bit like a Goldilocks situation. Last year, you didn't have enough quarterbacks to try to have some resolution. This year, you maybe have too many quarterbacks to have a resolution, and maybe either through portal or either through just the coaching staff paring down reps in fall camp, will you be able to really make that determination?
I was thinking about this, and I talked to a coach, former Ohio State coach, for the game, who basically said, you don't bring a guy in for 1 year unless you're starting him. I mean, Howard would have to really just kind of collapse. That was that one person's opinion, former coach, I won't name him. So you just don't do that as a coach. There's no reason to do that. The other thing that struck me was that Ryan Day knows what Devin Brown is. He's seen him enough, and this isn't a crack on Devin Brown, but he's seen him enough. Can Devin Brown improve? Yes. But he saw him all through the competition last year. Has he seen him in game film a lot? No. But he brought in a guy for a reason. He knows what Devin Brown is. Devin Brown is going to have to outplay Will Howard substantially, in my view, to win the starting job. I mean, it just, reading the tea leaves, that's the way it goes. I mean, we were right about McCord and Brown last year, although that happened very late because, Brown had the sort of some glitches in fall camp, or he was right there neck and neck, or maybe ahead of McCord. And maybe that's what it is this year. But I think that it shouldn't be lost that Ryan Day knows what Devin Brown brings to the table, and it may not be enough.
Just going to run this dog to see if we can find any type of human remains that are left.
Listen to Where Secrets Go to Die, The Disappearance of Derek Hennigan. From the Detroit Free Press, a new podcast set in the woods of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Available on Apple, Spotify, Freep.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes and no. I mean, yes, he's been with him for this is his 3rd year, but he was hurt. He had like 5 injuries last year, right? So he hasn't seen him in games when it mattered. But there's no question that after the Cotton Bowl debacle, that Day felt he had to bring in somebody. He had to. He couldn't go into this season with Devin Brown as the quarterback without serious competition and probably somebody who's better, or at least more proven. So I think we've all thought all along what you said, that Ryan or Will Howard is here to be the starting quarterback. He wouldn't have come otherwise. But you still have to earn it. And he's been at a disadvantage this spring because he's been here for weeks and months instead of years. And that matters. It's got a new offensive coordinator. And he had Bill O'Brien for 3 weeks. Now he's got Chip Kelly, new teammates, new everything. But I don't think anyone thinks of Will Howard as being like a superstar quarterback. I don't think they need that. I think they need somebody to not screw up, to make the plays that are there, to be a good leader, to be able to run the ball some. And that was a point of emphasis. That was maybe one of the things that came out of the spring. Not that they're going to design a lot of quarterback runs, stop Braxton Miller's offense, but they are going to expect the quarterback that he sees daylight to run. We heard that in the coaches clinic from Chip Kelly last week, that you see green grass, just go. And Kyle McCord didn't do that very often last year, and some of that was because he had ankle issues. He had sprained ankles. But C.J. Stroud obviously wasn't a runner, but the problem is Will Howard is not C.J. Stroud in terms of throwing the ball. Few are, if any. So it's going to have to be a combination. So I think they're looking for Will Howard to be a leader, to be mature, to be able to handle all the stuff that swirls around being an Ohio State quarterback, the maturity to not get up and, to be even keeled. And then to make the throws. And that's still, to me, the biggest question, can he do that consistently?
I think as far as you talk about his leg, it's not only just seeing the green grass and taking off and providing Ohio State an element of somebody who can just take off scrambling to pick up some yards in situations, but I like Howard's ability to just maneuver in the pocket, which I think maybe gives them a little more than what Kyle McCord offered. You saw that there was a moment in the second quarter, Howard's second drive of the game, where he had a little bit of a rush and he had to reset a little bit. And that was the play where he found Emeka Egbuka and he made the one-handed catch. But I thought that was a little glimpse into just his athleticism. I think that's something they didn't have last year, where the quarterback could extend a little bit, and that wasn't a grand play. I mean, Egbuka made the highlight really, but I thought that was sort of what maybe he can provide for Ohio State if he ends up being the starter and prevails over Brown.
And also short yardage. He's 6'4", 230 pounds.
I think he's actually listed as 6'5". He's big.
He's a big guy.
He's every bit of 6'5", because he's taller than Devin Brown.
So he's a move the pile guy. If it's 3rd or 4th and 1, and you say run over center, I think, Will Howard that's a formidable guy to have to try to bring down at the line of scrimmage.
If Urban was coaching this team, I think he would be salivating over running him 20 times a game, because it looks like he could take some of the bumps and bruises of the Big Ten.
But you're not going to want to do that this year with a 12-team playoff system. You got to play for. This is how it's going to be different this year. You play for the marathon, not the sprint. One game is not everything this year. So you're not going to want to run the quarterback more than you have to.
Let's keep it on the quarterbacks here and delve into, because I think we have to do this at least at this point. Transfer portal. What's your feel on what happens in the quarterback room? I mean, I cannot believe there will be, what are we talking, 5 or 6? 5?
Yeah.
I can't believe we'll have the same 5 here in the fall. That would be shocking to me, just the way the world works now in college football. If you had to rank them, who would you have, knowing what we know today, probably being Howard, Brown, either or, although that may matter in terms of who's going to be around in the fall?
Well,
I think Howard's obviously Howard remains. Brown has said he's not going anywhere. He loses a starting job. I think he knows he's one play away from being the guy, so he probably stays. And then you get to the third guy. I think Lincoln Kienholz is probably maybe odd man out, just because everything we've heard about the coaches talking up Justin Saying. And then you got Aaron Noland.
Julian.
Julian. I'm on Justin Fields. Sorry, Julian Saying. So I don't know how it plays out, but that would just be my thing. I would think probably that Lincoln Kienholz would be probably the most likely. And after that, maybe Aaron Noland, or maybe Aaron Noland a little more than Kienholz.
Well, they all have reasons to go and reasons to stay. If Will Howard doesn't think he's going to be the starter for some reason, then I don't have no reason to think he would. Obviously, he would want to go because it's got 1 year to do everything. I don't think he would. First of all, I think he's going to be the starter, so I think it's a moot point. Devin Brown can look at that situation and say, well, first of all, I think I can be the starter. Secondly, if I don't, Will Howard's here 1 year, and I'll take my chances beating out a guy who's just getting to campus. Lincoln Kienholz, it's a tougher sell because you think, well, I'm not going to start this year, and I've got Julian Saying and possibly Aaron Noland behind me. And so, he's got to figure out, does he want to stick it out? Julian Saying, no reason for him to leave because he's looking like maybe next year he's the guy. And, and Aaron Noland, you got to think, well, he was the guy in the recruiting class for the longest time until Julian Saying popped up at the last minute. He's got to be thinking, where do I stand? He didn't play until midway through the second or third quarter on Saturday. So he's got to be thinking, okay, where do I stand? On the other hand, there are worse things to do. And look, he's not going to start anywhere probably. So he can learn this year, sit back, learn from Chip Kelly and Ryan Day, and then maybe next year go somewhere where there's a better chance to play. So each guy, you can make a case for and against going.
So what's your
cut to the chase?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, again, we're going to look like idiots because today's Monday.
We're recording this on Monday.
Wait a minute. What else? Hey, what else is new?
Yeah, I know. I think
the portal opens tomorrow.
If I had to guess, I would say the most likely one is Lincoln Kienholz, followed by Aaron Noland. But it's just a guess, and I wouldn't be surprised if nobody goes in.
You think nobody will go in
right now?
Okay.
As of like this week.
Yeah. Well, sure. All right.
I mean, who knows? I mean,
Joey, what do you got?
Well, I think there's so much talk about all these guys going into the portal and speculation and all that. But I think it's important to keep in mind that none of these 5 passers, with the exception of Will Howard, is on a pressing timeline to start. Maybe in their own minds they are, and
they always are in their own minds.
But in terms of their eligibility clock, I mean, when Joe Burrow transferred in 2018 and went to LSU, he was at a fork in the road where he needed to make a decision because he had 2 years of eligibility left. He really was not in a position where if he wanted to start multiple seasons in college football, that he could afford to stay at Ohio State, knowing that he was behind Dwayne Haskins in the pecking order. With this case, you have Devin Brown has 3 years of eligibility left. Lincoln Kienholz has 4 years of eligibility left. Brown's a redshirt sophomore. Kienholz is a redshirt freshman. And then you have the 2 true freshmen, Aaron Nolan and Julian Sayin. They have 4 years of eligibility left. So nobody's in a situation where they absolutely have to play next year. And I think that's important context to have going into this, because they could easily, all 4 of them, assuming that Will Howard is the guy, could wait until December to transfer. And that is a time where teams are going to be more active looking for a starting quarterback. All 4 of those guys are talented enough where they could enter the portal and teams will be interested. But I don't think any of them are in pressing situations, right?
Okay, so let's cut to the chase. What do you say in fall first game, Akron game? Are they all 5 still here?
I'm going to go with the bold prediction. Say yes.
Okay, that's okay. But I would only add to what you say, because it made a lot of sense. I would only add this. What's the difference between Burrow and what it was, 3, 4, 5 years ago? NIL. And guys see a Sayin, see an Aaron Nolan, see a Kienholz, and I don't know what those guys are making. Sayin may be making more than the other 2. I don't know, but if somebody comes at them with a pretty decent offer, and that factors into the decision making now. I mean, it's they can stick around. They've got a lot of eligibility left, but if you can get X amount at another place, that's the new world we live in.
But keep in mind, spring is not as ideal to transfer as in the winter. The winter, that's when more teams are looking for starting quarterbacks. And if you were talking about the NIL pot of money that they have around, that would typically be the time of year where they're going to have more in reserve to maybe woo somebody out of the portal. Because guys, if you look at the quarterbacks who've been on the transfer market in recent years, way more have transferred in December, January than in the spring.
I think that's fair, but I also think that this thing's just going to increase. We're so new in it that I don't know. I just have a hard time seeing, because of just what's been happening with all the movement. I have a hard time seeing all 5 of them here for the opener. That's just me. Joey's taking a risky prediction. Prediction.
You asked what just a gut feeling. We don't know. I mean, it's not like we have some beliefs.
I'm asking your opinion.
Okay.
I gave my opinion in the way that could maximize my credit, because if I with the contrarian view and say none of them transfer, then I'm going to look very smart. And if you get more credit for being right. So I'm trying to give the most credit.
You're smarter than the average bear. I'll give you that.
It would probably be safer to bang on somebody transferring. That would be the conventional wisdom.
Look, they could have 2 guys going tomorrow, and I wouldn't be shocked.
Right.
If Lincoln Kienholz and Aaron Nolan enter the portal tomorrow, I'd be very surprised if Will Howard does, and I'd be very surprised if Julian Sayin does. I'd be surprised if Devin Brown does, but not as surprised as the other 2.
Yeah. All right. What about anything else about the spring practice?
The quarterback showcase
spring game.
Well, let's. I was hoping that we would see some spectacular stuff from Jeremiah Smith, because we've seen it in the spring. We've heard about it in the spring. It borders on the hyperbolic in terms of
a drop.
What?
You saw a drop.
Yeah, right. It was not a bad drop. It was a bit of a tough catch, but yeah, he had it in his hands. So yeah, it was technically a drop. But everything I've heard is that this freshman is spectacular, and he had 2 catches for 12 yards on Saturday, so quiet day for him. You really couldn't tell much from the running backs because, like with Trevion Henderson, it was 2 touch. He had what looked to me like a touchdown run, but they called it dead. Quinshon Judkins looked good in the limited action we saw. I thought it was interesting that Carson Hinsman started at right guard instead of Luke Montgomery, because we had seen Montgomery start most of the spring there. Tiger Shabola also saw time at right guard along with Montgomery. It seems like the buzz about Josh Fryer moving inside from right tackle to right guard is fading. Carson, I would guess that Seth McLaughlin will be the center, especially since they had Hinsman playing guard on Saturday. Other than that, I didn't see too many surprises. I thought CJ Hicks looked good. Caleb Downs didn't do much on Saturday, but we know what he's going to do a lot on Saturdays in the fall. But no, there was the thing about the spring game. We said this at the time. This was such a nondescript game. There was nobody that just kind of jumped out. Even one of these, guys that we joke about being Mr. April. We didn't even have that. Some guy comes out of nowhere and you'll never hear from him again, but he at least had his moment in the sun. It was just kind of like, blah.
Here's my Jeremiah Smith story. I said he made a drop. I was half kidding. I mean, he's gotten all the love. He's been compared by several people to LeBron James. Yeah. Which I think is an interesting comparison. I hope it's LeBron James, the basketball player, not LeBron James, the football player, because LeBron did play football in high school and he was pretty good, but there was some talk about he didn't like to get hit too much. So we'll just put that out there. But more germane to this, I covered 2 games of LeBron's when he was in high school. I went up to Akron, and the first time I saw him, he got all the hype, like Jeremiah Smith, and he had a bad game. And I had never, you didn't know anything about it. There weren't highlights.
What year was he?
I think it was his junior year. I want to say his junior year, because I later did see him in the state championship game. Maybe it was his senior year. I don't know. It was his junior or senior year. Could have been sophomore. I don't know. Many moons ago. So I went up there, and he was not impressive. He had like 14, 15 points, a lot of turnovers, and I walked away thinking, what's the big deal? Well, about a month later, I went up there again for another game and walked away and said, that's the best high school basketball player I've ever seen and probably ever will see. So the point being that you can't go off one little drop with Jeremiah Smith to say
one scrimmage.
That he's overrated. I expect him to be really good, but that doesn't mean he's incredible every time.
No, and wide receivers more than any other position are at the mercy of everything else. Do they throw the ball to them? I think running backs are going to get the ball 15, 20 times a game. Wide receivers might get it a handful of times, and you got to make the most of it. And if passes on target or good coverage, it doesn't happen. But he's the answer to Marvin Harrison, or the successor to Marvin Harrison Jr. And you have Emeka Egbuka, who's really, really good, really good. And
I want to hear Joey on this too, because I think he mentioned during the scrimmage. One thing we're failing to mention. The offense there were no spectacular plays. Maybe it's because this defense is just that good, especially the secondary. Joey, I think you talked about that during the game. Maybe it's just there weren't a lot of huge plays. They didn't throw downfield a lot. Part of it's the wind. Part of it's just this defense may be that spectacular.
You talk about guys who had sort of their moments in the sun. Calvin Simpson-Hunt had one pick. Jalen McClain had another. And the secondary was pretty depleted. Somewhat wise with injuries, just with Lathan Ransom being limited. Malik Hartford wasn't available because of injury. And you thought maybe in the game without a lot of safety depth, and we'll see how long Caleb Down plays, that Ohio State could break some big plays. But to the credit, some of those second-team corners, safeties, I thought stepped up and made some plays. I think it's a credit to how much deeper they are in the back end than they were 2-3 years ago when Jim Knowles and Tim Walton were first taking over. You think about where they were at the end of the time in 2021 when Matt Barnes and Kerry Combs were there. They've really, I think, upgraded their talent in the back end.
Yeah, defense should be just lights out this year. You saw Jack Sawyer, one play that Carson Hinsman would like to forget was Jack Sawyer just pushed him backward, just bullied him, bull rushed him. And sacked, we don't actually sack the quarterback, but it would have been a sack. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Tyleik Williams, Ty Hamilton, and then some of these other guys that also, are pretty good. Cade Curries and Kenyatta Jackson. They've talked about Jason Moore, right? This spring. So they've got a lot of talent, and Denzel Burke is as good as it gets. David Igbenogza I thought looked good on Saturday. The other cornerback, Jordan Hancock, broke up one of the passes to Jeremiah Smith. So you didn't have Lathan Ransom, you didn't have Lorenzo Styles. We would have liked to have seen Lorenzo Styles Jr. He was out with what they said was some kind of procedure.
His arm was in a sling. I think he's left.
Okay. So, and Cody Simon replaces Tommy Eichenberg, and there shouldn't be, too much of a drop off there. Cody Simon's a fifth-year guy, really smart, knows the defense inside and out. You have CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles at linebacker. I mean, it's a loaded defense. There's just no getting around it.
Yeah, I don't know where you would drop their weakness on defense. I think you could probably see it. I think the linebacker is still an open question. I think Cody Simon is really solid and dependable. But the other weak side spot, CJ Hicks just has played such few snaps there. I know there's the recruiting pedigree, but you just haven't seen it yet on the film. And then Sonny Styles still is switching positions. I think they'll ultimately be okay at that spot. But you look at some of the games late in the season last year, I thought they were exploited at times at linebacker. Certainly Tommy Eichenberg, I thought he was much better in 2022. But he was playing hurt the last month of the season. But Michigan was able to pick on the linebackers when they were throwing the ball late last year. And again, when you have a top 5 defense, you're kind of nitpicking in some areas, but that was probably a question for Ohio State down the stretch last year. Was just getting maybe better play from their linebackers.
So
I thought it was interesting.
Go ahead.
I thought it was interesting. Jim Knowles was asked about CJ Hicks, and you kind of read between the lines with what coaches say a lot of times. And he said, basically he's much better as a blitzer right now. You direct him where to go, and he uses athleticism and makes plays. Well, this is his third year in the program. You want him to be somebody who they say he knows the defense inside and out, and he can do everything. We didn't hear that. So look, CJ Hicks, it's time for him. And I thought that was, maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. And maybe CJ Hicks does know the defense better than I'm giving him credit for. I don't know that. But you go by what people say because we don't get to watch a whole lot. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, I've talked to CJ Hicks. He's a smart guy. It's not like he's, can't grasp things. He's a smart guy. It's just sometimes people take longer to feel comfortable in the offense or in the defense and just react to things because they know it so well.
Keep in mind, too, he played a bunch of different positions other than linebacker in high school. And the other thing, too, Bill, the way you talk about, or the way Jim Knowles laid out that comment, it's sort of the way he actually talked about Josh Proctor in year one, where he was somebody where they felt like his straight line ability and just being able to jump on stuff was good. And maybe it took until year 2 for things to really click into place for Proctor.
So coming out of the spring game, I find it, maybe this is broken record, but is this deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra said? Because if we'd have gone back a year, we'd have said, okay, what are the issues? The issue probably number 1 is offensive line, which we still don't know 100%. I mean, let's put it this way. You're not hearing much of like this thing is set and these guys are going to be incredible. We haven't really heard that. You've got the quarterback unknown, probably just like last year, a two-man competition. That's what you've got again this year. With an the difference is Will Howard has experience. Kyle McCord did not have much experience last year, and neither did Devin Brown, obviously. So Will Howard at least has, game experience, but still that's a question mark. The receivers are solid. The running backs probably even upgraded. But that offensive line and quarterback, and then the other side, I do remember us talking about like linebackers last year. It was Eichenberg, and there wouldn't be an issue there. But, there was Steel Chambers, and the linebackers were sort of I wouldn't say unknown quantity, but they definitely were sort of second tier compared to maybe the defensive line was a strength last year. And I think it sounds like it's a defensive line is a strength again. Now, the secondary last year, I think there were some question marks, right?
Yeah, we didn't know about Denzel Burks.
Right.
Yeah.
So they've upgraded. So there's your strength. But boy, Bill just loves talking about that O-line, and he's right. You just don't know. They couldn't run the ball when they absolutely had to in short yardage last year. Let's see if they can do it this year.
Speaking of short yardage, what did you think of the T formation?
I think somebody should have written about that.
The what?
The T formation.
Oh yeah, right. Oh, who knows? I mean, Chip Kelly.
That probably brought you back to your days as a student.
Yeah, I was probably single wing. But days. Well, yeah, I think I was. Woody was gone. Woody was gone before I got there. So I can at least say that.
Childhood. Then you also about those Rose Bowls in the 70s.
Oh yeah. Well, part of that was an homage by Chip Kelly. He even said it. It was sort of like a homage to Woody Hayes and the T and all that. But hey, they better be better running the ball. They better be better
talking.
Yes, in short yardage situations. Yeah. I would guess that they will be with Chip Kelly. But we'll see. If the offensive line isn't all that much better, there's not much you can do.
The T formation was funny, just him talking about paying tribute to Woody Hayes. It's sort of all politics is local. The new offensive coordinator's first play he calls in public for Ohio State fans is an homage to Woody playing the hits for the locals. But Chip did say they ran it 21 times, or they ran out of that formation 21 times at UCLA. So conceivably, you could see it in the red zone or fourth and short or something, but they do need to get better in short yardage situations because that was certainly a weak spot for them last year.
Chip can't help himself. I think the offense will be more dynamic. I'm looking, I thought it had gotten a little predictable the last year or two. So I do think Chip Kelly is an upgrade. He'll infuse some creativity into it. I'm not sure he's like the savior of the offense, but I think he's got a track record of being successful. Not necessarily as an NFL head coach too much, but running an offense, pretty impressive resume. And so I think Buckeye Nation will be more happy than not with Chip Kelly running the show.
It's interesting with Chip because Ryan Day learns so much from him, and so much of what Ohio State does offensively comes from principles of the Chip Kelly offense. He gave a talk at the coaches clinic last Thursday on the stretch run play, which has been Ohio State's, I don't want to call it bread and butter because it hasn't always worked as ideally as Chip talked about it, but it's a lot of the same ideas. It's going to be, I think, with Chip maybe getting it to be more effective or adding some wrinkles to figure out a way to get more out of it. But that's certainly not been a run play there. It's been as successful as Ohio State would have liked, but maybe you get sort of the originator of some of these ideas, or the guy who taught Ryan Day to teach it, and that'll certainly be, I think, a big bonus for them.
I'm also curious how those two are going to interact on game day. It's Chip Kelly's offense. He calls the plays. Is Ryan Day really going to – how much veto power? Well, he has ultimate veto power. How much will he veto play calling? I just think it's an interesting dynamic. I don't suggest it'll fail. I just think it's something to keep an eye on. It's intriguing how these guys will work together.
Well, whenever the protege becomes the boss, it's always interesting, right? I mean, if there are different roles. I don't get this. First of all, I don't get the sense that Chip Kelly is the kind of guy who gets hung up on titles or cares about that. I think he just wants to draw football plays.
Yeah, but somebody's got to call that play.
No, I know. But I also think that they're probably so in sync. I'm not sure they're going to disagree very much. And we'll find out. I mean, that'll be, we won't find out. We probably won't find out, but, it could happen.
Right.
We'll never find out, right?
It'll be the whole Tressel thing. Who's calling the plays? Tress was the master of not giving you the answer on that. Because every year there was a question of, well, who's really calling the plays? And Jim Bowman took a lot of heat as the O-line coach and offensive coordinator as the play caller. But nobody really believed that Jim Tressel didn't have final say on that stuff. So I see maybe Ryan Day deferring a little more to Chip on it's your baby, and only when it's some really major thing will Ryan Day step in. Can he help himself? That's the question.
Well, I don't think he wants to help himself. I mean, I think he wants to. I think he wants Chip Kelly to do for the offense what Jim Knowles does for the
I would
defense.
agree with that. But I would agree with that. But that's been his bread and butter. So we'll see. Again, I'm not suggesting it won't work. I think I've already said I think Chip Kelly is an upgrade and will be good for the program. But I don't know. I just think it's going to be a fun thing to watch.
Well, I think.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think that just about does it for spring game thoughts, unless anybody else wants to do the last 30 seconds. I have one more thing I'm making to say.
No, I think we probably covered it. I didn't see anything in the spring to make me think that this could be a special team. I mean, I would have liked for Will Howard to come in on day one and just take over. It's unrealistic because of all the things we talked about, do program and all that. I didn't see anything that made me think, well, that's a real red flag. I think the offensive line will be better. Just if for nothing else, another year of experience. Josh Simmons just was arriving, hadn't even arrived a year ago, and was thrown into left tackle. So things like that will make a difference. Quinshon Judkins being a tandem with Travion Henderson is probably the best in the country. Defense should be we were nitpicking to try to find weaknesses, right? And they didn't have Caleb Downs last year. Josh Proctor was very good. Caleb Downs is special. Mm-hmm. And so they have a chance to be just phenomenal on defense. And if the offense gets back to where it was, then this is a national championship contender. There's no doubt about it.
Well, the only thing I would add is watch for the running backs to catch balls more than they have. I think you're going to see a lot of running backs catch footballs and go.
I still, Bill, as you say, you didn't see anything that makes you think they can't be a special team. I still think when you look back on the Cotton Bowl and how bad the offensive line finished last year, I don't think the offensive line showed me anything that they couldn't take a step forward. But I don't know if I felt I left spring with a lot of confidence that they're going to be improved other than having continuity, and they do add Seth McLaughlin. I think that'll help, but I think that's still an open question, and we will see if there's something that would doom Ohio State or really sort of stand in their way of achieving the obstacles. That still feels like the dynamic that would do them in.
I agree with that, and they don't have now. There aren't many Orlando Paces out there, or John Hicks. Let's face it. But they don't have that one guy, it seems like, that's just a stud NFL starter at the moment. I just don't see it.
I think Donovan Jackson is. But he's a guard, and guards generally aren't the kind of dominating players that tackles are in terms of dictating the game, left tackle especially. But I think he's the best of them in terms of ability. I think Josh Simmons, if he can get it all figured out, has talent. I mean, look, he's still a sophomore. His third year. It'll be a redshirt. It'll be a junior. I'm sorry. It'll be a junior. Seth McLaughlin is probably what you're looking for. You want a center who knows everything, who's experienced. And again, I'm not trying to slam Carson Hinsman because he was thrown into that before he was ready, but he was not ready last year. And when you have a center who is overmatched, that's a really tough thing to overcome. And, this year Carson Hinsman looks much better and Seth McLaughlin's there. So I think that position is going to be much better.
One credit to the line, I will say, for Saturday is they didn't have any of the procedural penalties and things that really that weighed them down last year. Hey, just charting progress here.
Yeah. Amen to that, right?
That's true. Hey,
true fact.
True fact.
You didn't see illegal formations or illegal procedure or holding penalties or false starts, which, I mean, that was a big problem for the line last year. So, and especially for Josh Simmons, I think in some ways that sort of skewed what I think was overall a decent start for somebody who came in the summer. So, just accounting for that as well. But I think we will wrap things up here on this edition of the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast. Stay tuned throughout the week and the rest of the month as the spring transfer window opens, which could prompt some more roster shuffling, either guys leaving the Buckeyes or guys coming to the Buckeyes. They had 20 guys go into the portal. One withdrew in the winter period. They added 6 guys. The spring is not quite as active as the winter traditionally, but there still could be things of note, and we will certainly note that at dispatch.com/sports and on the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.
Just going to run this dog to see if we can find any type of human remains that are left.
Listen to Where Secrets Go to Die, The Disappearance of Derek Hennigan. From the Detroit Free Press, a new podcast set in the woods of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Available on Apple, Spotify, Freep.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.